the effect that we can learn natural languages. So somebody could say Gam Ania, Ashvam Ania, you can learn the variables through deductive reasoning, but you cannot sort of make that leap to the Veda. And the second objection is one of the Antaparampara, the blind chain. And so the comes back and basically says, well, even though we can't learn it through we can't learn the Veda through natural language, we can learn it from a teacher. The Buddhist then says, how did that teacher access it? They can never access suprasensory objects. And if they claim to have learned it from their teacher, and they from their teacher, and so on, it would have never been learned from one person in the original place. There would be no basis. The third objection is that the Veda does not teach its own language. The Veda does not say, this is what I mean when I say this word. It doesn't work in the way of, say, Vyakarna. And the conclusion, well, no, there's one more point that the Buddhist raises, which is that there are discrepancies between different specialist interpreters of the Veda's meaning, and also there are irregularities in the text that preclude us from having any certainty about it. And so the conclusion of the Buddhist is basically that we cannot learn the Veda's meaning. And this begins Jayanta's own counter-argument. Jayanta begins by deferring to previous discussion, and then the core position Jayanta puts forward is that the words in the Veda are actually, and their reference, are the same as the words and their reference in the world. So rice would mean the same thing in the Veda and in the world. It's just the composition of sentences which are different. We get new sentences, but they are using the same words, and therefore we can use Laukika language to access the meaning of the Veda. The second point Jayanta makes is, you said Vyakarna will not work, but you thought about Mimamsa, that Mimamsa can get us contextual meaning. And the third point that Jayanta makes is he basically flips around how Yukirti's claim against access perception to access suprasensory objects and says that's the very point of the Veda. The Veda's very raison d'etre is to get us to these suprasensory objects. And the last point Jayanta makes is that there is an authoritative basis to the Veda. And Jayanta points us both to the Mimamsa view, that the Veda is eternal, it has always been there, and Jayanta also points to the Nayayika view, which is that the Veda comes in with creation cycles of the universe. And that is, as I see it, the overarching structure. And so what Jayanta really does is turn the table on the allegation of a tradition of blind following blind and seek to give it an authoritative basis. And Grahali's conclusion is to the effect that while he appreciates Jayanta's allegiance of the Mimamsa and Nyaya positions, that rationality still weighs in favor of the Buddhist standpoint. And with that, I will end my summary. Hopefully
Yeah, so I'll open the floor for discussion at this point, unless Alessandro wants to say something right now.
Yeah, maybe just that my conclusion is that insofar as learning semantic relations between words and reference, I think Dharmakirti had a very solid point. in the sense that, as we know very well, even a word like vidhi or yoga is difficult to figure out a reference for that by perception or inference, as Kei Kataoka has shown very well in this paper that he wrote for the Bloomsbury book, Handbook of Philosophy of Language. Shali Kanata works very hard to figure out how we can learn the meaning of a command by Vyutpatti, Vriddha Vyavahara. That's very difficult to figure out. So that I think Dharmakirti has a very solid point, that invisible object, ultrasensible object, how do you know these things? So this is difficult to refute. But Dharmakirti is working with the theory of Apoha, and the theory of Apoha, as we have discussed many times, is very deficient insofar as Vakyartha. The theory of Apoha is not a theory of compositionality at all. And that is where Jayanta makes mincemeat of a Buddhist by bringing up the theory of compositionality. His own Tattparya theory, which is behind all this discussion, is clearly something that the Buddhists cannot tackle, I think. So I think the strong point of Jayanta is to show that there is no difference in substance between learning a Vedic sentence or understanding a Vedic sentence and understanding a new poetical composition. Because every new poetical composition is different from what has been spoken or heard before. So how do you learn this? How do you understand this according to the Buddhists? So that the Buddhists would have problem even explaining that, just like explaining the Vedic meanings. So in this sense, I think that Tattparya theory of Jayanta, which is, in my understanding, a synthesis between the Abhihita Anvayavada and the Anvita Abhidhana of Prabhakara, this theory, I think, Jayanta claims to be explaining the Vedic meanings as well. So he's putting the weight on the Vedic sentences, not on the Vedic words. Insofar as lexicon, semantics, and so on, Jayanta claims later on in the 6th Annika that Vyakarana and Mimamsa are perfectly equipped to teach and to transmit the meaning of the Veda. And that is where I think the point about being less rational, because you have to believe or you have to share the authoritativeness of Vyakarana and Mimamsa on this. Otherwise, the part of Jayanta's argument fails. I don't know if that helps. Sorry for the too long.
No, that was quite to the point. Of course, the difference between the compositions of a poet and the Vedic composition is that the poet will talk about stuff that we have ultimately access to. So they will speak about things that are ultimately perceptible, whereas the Veda speaks about. So the Buddhists could have a strong point about the difference between understanding Vedic sentences and Kalidasa. Anyway, the floor is open if you have other questions or I was somehow hoping for Monica to try in, but please say.
Yeah. So the Jati Anda Parampara Nyaya is already in Shabara. So I think the Buddhist uses the same Nyaya against the Mimamsa, which of course the Shabara Mimamsa has to accept. So it's against the same, using the same Nyaya against the Mimamsa, turn back the same Nyaya.
Is using Mimamsa again.
Yes, this is actually some doubt or a question that I would have, because how can a Mimamsaka refute Andha Parampara because the Jayanta solves it by saying that after all we believe in in Sanketa and Samaya. So there is Ishvara at the beginning of creation, which sets all this in motion. Just like the meanings of the common language words are coming from the original Sanketas, even more so the Veda comes from him, from Ishvara. But in the case of Mimamsa, you have a Anadi parampara. So, so that is more difficult, I think, for the Mimamsaka to counter the Andhaparampara attack. So I'm not sure how a Mimamsaka can actually refute the Andhaparampara argument.
Yeah, of course, it's difficult, but the Shabara uses in another context, bit different. So anyway, so, yeah, and also another the point that the Sharikanata tries to solve the problem. So I think the historically speaking, the both Sharikanata and Jayanta share a kind of same problem. They have to solve somehow. And yeah, that's caused by the Dharmakirti's criticism. So that's interesting for me. Thank you.
Yeah, and this is also interesting, a further confirmation that there is no knowledge, mutual knowledge between Shalikanatha and Jayanta. Because I don't see any of the argument that you nicely put down in the article, okay? In this, throughout the six Annika, I didn't see any trace of that. So and vice versa, all this, because what Jayanta does after, this is just the very first part of the third part of the Nyamanjari 6. It's just the beginning, what I put down in this paper. It's just a few, maybe 5-6 pages. Then there are 35 pages, 40 pages more of Sanskrit, which is all taken from the Vyakarana Adhikarana of the Tantravartika. So he's connecting directly the discussion against Dharmakirti with the Vyakarana Adhikarana. It's something that Shalikanatha does not do. So it's a completely different way of fleshing out the problem.
As usual, the floor is open for any other comment, both from the audience and from the presenters. One point I wanted to point out while you're thinking about other questions is that it's fun how Monica and Alessandro are somehow highlighting two aspects, two polarities of Vedic language. On the one hand, Vedic language needs to be close to human language because otherwise it would not be understandable, as Alessandro is pointing out. On the other hand, Monica will tell us later how it needs to be different than human language as an evidence of the fact that it is Avarusheya, that it's not like human language. So it seems that Vedic language is in a somehow, it needs to be different, but not too different.
Yeah, to Jayanta's, as a disclaimer, I have to say that this thing of the Veda being composed of common language words is just a prima facie reaction to Dharmakirti. I think my understanding is that Jayanta believes that most words in the Veda are shared by common language, by common Sanskrit, but he knows very well that there are many words that they are not ever used in a common language. So he knows that. So this is just part of his argumentation line. So we shouldn't believe that he believes that each and every word of the Veda can be learned through Vriddha Vyavahara. That's not the case. His main, the weight of the argument that we'll put later on is on Panini and Grammar. That is how we learn Vedic words. That is the solution for him, not Vriddha Vyavahara. But of course, Vriddha Vyavahara is a necessary step towards that. First, Vriddha Vyavahara, Sanskrit, then refining of Sanskrit, including Vedic Sanskrit, through Vyakarana and Mimamsa. I think that is ultimately his answer to the problem.
Doesn't this beg the question? Because how did Panini and so on know about the correct meaning of this Vedic word?
Yeah, either Anadi origin, like the Mimamsaka would want it, or Ishvara. That is the starting point for the Nayayika. So is Ishvara, you cannot dispute the authority of Ishvara, no? So if he teaches you something, that must be true. So that is a fixed point that is reliable, is the absolute apta vakta, so that we cannot dispute that for an Nayayika, no, I think. At the time of Jayant, of course, earlier it was different.
Okay, I see. So we basically have to use Ishvara as the one solution for everything, which is, of course, understandable on the one hand. On the other hand, as a Mimamsa scholar, really annoying because, yes, of course, it solves all problems, but it creates a huge problem because you have to admit the existence of an Ishvara. Now, the problem is the next one would have been Anil Kumar, but Krisha is warning us that perhaps his connectivity also might not be that good. So, Anil, if you want to try.
Could I ask a question about? It's sort of related. It's sort of related, but very loosely. Do you think there's any that these Nayayikas are at all picking up off of what Shankara talks about in the Devatati Karana? Because he introduces these cycles of creation destruction where there is some sort of Ishvara like being creating the Veda. And I wonder if does Shankara say that before any Nayayikas, or do the Nayayikas say it first?
Oh, I can hear you.
But for as far as Jayanta is concerned, there is no evidence that Jayanta knew Shankara in any way.
Alessandro,
That
now
is
I
my
can hear
understanding,
you.
at least. Oh, Akane, now we can hear you. What did you do? You
think
fixed your mic, you
yeah,
fixed your
yeah.
earphones. What happened?
Yes, yeah. I don't know what happens, but somehow now I can see I can hear you clearly. Okay. I was almost crying, but now I think I'm joining.
Okay, very good. Yeah, so I don't think that Jayanta knew Shankara in any way. That is, we are at the end of the 9th century in Kashmir, and obviously Shankara had not reached that area yet. Or at least had not reached Jayanta's ears. But if someone else knows something different about Shankara and Kashmir, tell me. This is my understanding, that at the end of the 9th century, there was no Shankara knowledge in Kashmir.
Okay.
Okay, so it's a very tribulated and excruciating session tonight. Well, tonight for me, today for you, because the next speaker should have been Anil Kumar, who couldn't join, or he has tried to join and didn't manage. So I'll now look at the Q&A section from the participants, and meanwhile, I'd like to say that perhaps we can ask Akane to be the next one after if Anil Kumar doesn't connect back. So, Alessandro, if you look at the Q&A, the two questions by Gerald Penn seem to be both directed to you. Well, one is a statement we can all agree about, namely that part of Panini is about Vedic sentences. But perhaps the first one would be something you might want to address.
Yeah, well, I think we have to keep in mind the regular Vyutpatti Vriddha Vyavahara process as Jayanta's ideas and in general the Mimamsa ideas of language acquisition. And in order for the Vyutpatti process to happen, Vriddha Vyavahara, we need three people and we need observable, perceivable objects. Otherwise, that is not possible. Because the bala, the child learning words and meanings, needs to observe phenomenon that they are perceivable in order to build inferences. And this is the process that Jayanta and others, Shalikanata, they explained very well. And I don't think we can do without that to start with, if we put ourselves in their boots. Now, how to learn words that they are not learnable through Vriddha Vyavahara, that is exactly the question. Whether it is finance or poetry or Veda, we have to discuss the different processes and authorities involved. I don't know if that answers Gerald Penn's question.
So let me move back. Let me move on. As I said, it seems that Anil is not able to join us. I'll leave time for him for later, just in case he can join us, and suggest that we meanwhile move on to Akana's paper.
Sure, sure. Still you can hear me.
We can. Monica, am I right that it was you summarizing her?
Yes. Can you hear me?
We can.
I can.
Because I was afraid to speak up. Okay, very quickly. So Akana's paper is on bhava, kriya, and prayatna. And it's all related to her work on bhavana viveka. And so first very important distinction and introduction is we have action expression, kriya and bhava. And it's already grammarian's idea then and Mimamsa in the very beginning. So for grammarians, action is expressed by dhatu, verbal root, and for example, Kumarila, as far as Mimamsa is concerned, it's in pratyaya, so it's in the verbal ending. So this is the important moment. And when we look at grammarian's approach, we have such a definition according to Akane, kriya, vachano, dhatu. So the expression is, dhatu is expressing kriya. And so this is a complex thing, and this is an ordered process. This is important, that this is a sequence, this is a process, and it cannot be grasped at once. Katyayana comments that uses also the term bhava, and bhava is also expressing, I mean, this is also the expression of the verbal root. There is this distinction pointed out by Kayata and Nagesha between kriya and bhava. So kriya would be related to saparispanda sadhana sadhya, so expressing, let's say, movement or action with movement, and bhava would be related to aparispanda sadhana sadhya. Yes, are you following? Are you listening? Okay. And so that would be action without movement. So there is this distinction which comes back in Akana's paper. So according to grammarians, there is a slightly different interpretation of this kriya and bhava, but it's always the case that the verbal root expresses them. And we have Bhartihari's point of view introduced, and for him, the case, they are always sadhya. So we have this something which should be accomplished or being processed. Okay. And action being a sadhya needs sadhana, so it needs karakas. It's in organic relationship with karakas. For Mimamsa, from Jaimini, there is another statement on definition, which is bhavartha karma shabda. So kriya is conveyed by word expressing the function to come into existence, and there is this kriya is a function to produce. This is important for Mimamsa. So it's bhavana and bhavana later. So kriya is bhavana, and it's not dhatu artha bhavana. So this is Mimamsa's approach, and with Shabara we have another idea coming into discussion, which is prayatna, effort. So there is this expression of one should make an effort, one should make some things, one to a specific intention to produce something. This prayatna, according to Akane's interpretation of Shabara, is bhavana. And we, in Kumarila, in his Santavardika, provides elaboration of Vyapara, which is synonymous of Kriya, with Bhavana, and he is under the influence of grammarians again. And so we have this Santya used in the explanation, emphasis on the aspect of being in the middle of the process. And when we look at Kumarila's explanations of what's bhavana, we have another important term coming up, audasinya prachit upam. So we have this suppression of indifference, explaining how it works, how this action is expressed. There's no other, not much explanation in Kumarila's commentary. So according to Akane, Kumarila's intention is include mental activity also. So with this prayatna we have also mental activity expressed without actual movements. So there is this mental formulation, not only physical action. As an attempt, according to Akane, to break away from Vaisheshika's concept of action. And yes, when we look at Mandana's approach to this, so that he's, because all of this was Bhavana Viveka's approach, when we look at Uttarapaksha with Mandana, there is a problem of identity between Sadhya and Bhavya. And there is a distinction introduced between actual verbs, for example, pachati, and gerund noun or nouns expressing action, for example, paka. And according to Bhartihari, they are both expressing sadhyata, but there is a stronger relation with pachati than with paka. So there is this question how it works, what's really more important to express action, and there is a discussion. Okay, so I come back to that. Yeah. According to, with this idea of introducing of bhavana, pachati is pakam karoti, so is to produce paka, to produce this result of for us, from Gamaliel's point of view, the noun expressing action. Okay, and for grammarians, the object of a verbal root is always sadhya, is always to parispanda and aparispanda distinction between movement and non-movement. When we look at prayatna, in this case, we, according to Akane, remove the process perspective. So we are not any longer interested in the sequence, processing.